My art name is Mac, MAC, and I am a self-taught independent Spanish-Cuban American artist based in London at the moment. I began painting in 2012 when really the need to put something down on canvas came to me. A little bit like a lightning bolt, a little bit like an itch that needed to be scratched. Although I've always been quite creative, I've always been an avid writer of fiction, which in my early 20s evolved into poetry, and now I'm also writing more fiction as I enter my 30s as well. Normally, I think how I see the world is very much full of color, full of vibrancy. Really, this helps me capture the abstract illusion of everyday life by emphasizing that hidden vibrancy that surrounds us. And I also found a passion for the fusion and connection really between the world and color, which I try to depict in my paintings, my photograph, and in my poetry as well. In my upbringing, I guess there were specific reference points such as Georgia O'Keeffe. She's always been a huge influence of mine. However, I don't really touch on. I look more at, I would say, abstract concepts as opposed to necessarily really moving away from the contemporary need for conceptual meaning in art. And for this meaning, I sort of dissociate a little bit from necessarily my childhood and my background and my upbringing. I feel that everything that I am and everything that I've become has led me to sort of depict the world and with as much color as possible. And some of my favorite artists include, Lee Krasner, Anna Mendieta, Gretchen Bender, Betty Tompkins, Georgia O'Keeffe, as mentioned, and Frank Bolan as well. Very colorful, abstract imagery that he depicts, and also Gerhard Richter. At the moment, I have been focusing more on my literary endeavors, and really as well as some musical creativity. That being said, sometimes I do feel the need to put something down on canvas or put something down on some form of less of physical medium. I guess an advice that I would, or what the biggest challenge is for being an artist is really all the challenges that we have in today's day and age, or all the additional requirements that are placed on artists in today's day and age versus the kind of requirements that an artist back in the day would have to abide by. So, for example, I think social media is a big barrier for a lot of artists because it doesn't necessarily promote you based on your merit. It simply promotes you based on the content and how often you post. And I think a lot of the art industry at the moment has become really vacuous in the sense that they prioritize users or artists who have many followers, but aren't necessarily bringing about an important message to the world. I also find in the art world it is very difficult to even study it. I think now people who typically enter the art world are those who have really kind of a more privileged background. And from my perspective, I actually don't do art as my main source of income. I do have a 9-to-5 job, and I really just let out what I need to let out when I have to. And of course, it would be great to be able to monetize off of my art, but realistically, other people have a much harder time at that as well. I guess any advice I would give to my younger self is probably just throw yourself at it. Just not be scared. If you want to throw paint on a canvas and wiggle around it completely naked, then that's a fun thing to do, and definitely you should do it. I think probably just finding a space and finding like-minded people, like-minded artists around your network is really influential, and it really helps you stay accountable and stay on top of your work as well. It also gives you the motivation and perhaps the group network really to go forward. In terms of unconventional mediums and techniques, that's a great question. I have painted before on things such as plastic. I have used things such as oh my god, I've forgotten now. Oh, nail polish. I've used nail polish a lot on my works as well. Just because I find that it creates a very interesting medium. And in fact, I think it is almost a message around how this kind of acrylic nature is overconsumed and it's overproduced, and it is actually in fact harmful to our planet. And in fact, I would say I've tried to move away as much as possible from things such as acrylic paints or even resin art, because I know that they do have a harmful impact on our environment. So I would say that's kind of turned me into using different mediums. For example, flowers, which I dry up, and then paste onto different backgrounds. I also enjoy the concept of puzzles, so almost creating a large piece and then tearing it apart and then re-putting it back into a different shape or into a different image to mean something else or to depict something different or something more impactful. And that's really one of my favorite mediums, because I do love a good jigsaw puzzle. So making that out of my art is actually a very, very fun endeavor. In terms of what I do while I'm actually doing my work, I think I do prefer complete silence sometimes. If I am painting, sometimes I might put on some TV just as background noise, just to have some voices to keep me going. But usually I think music can be a bit distracting for me personally. So I normally just have certain voices behind me, but nothing that I necessarily need to be very engaged with, because I like to be present and engaged and thinking about the work that I'm working on in that moment. I do actually have all of my work, or a lot of my work is hung up across my house, and really that was one of the main reasons why I started painting, was because I needed to fill the walls of my very, very white empty house. And so when people do come to my house, they normally comment on it and they say, "Wow, that's amazing. I like it very much. I like your aesthetic." And I think, there is sort of a cohesion in terms of the way that the paintings look and sort of the message they bring about. So even all of them together, they create this kind of artistic personality that I think comes across for a lot of people who are able to see it. And a lot of them do say that that is the kind of inspiration that they're getting as well, and that they absolutely love the vibrancy of the colors, and that I have a good control of how to use color. So that's always very nice to hear. Um, in terms of what I find that people take from my artwork, what I absolutely love is for people to come to my house and see my paintings and try to almost try to create meaning of it for themselves. I think loads of people will see one of my artworks and they'll perhaps interpret it in one way or another, but they're usually quite different. And I think that's the funnest part, engaging in a sort of dialogue or discourse about what the potential meaning behind a piece of art is. And I think it's so valuable that perhaps when I'm looking at a piece of painting, it's making me feel something that perhaps my friends don't feel, or perhaps they feel something completely different, or perhaps they're understanding something completely different. And what I love is that actually all those interpretations are incredibly valid, and also incredibly interesting, because there is no wrong or right reason. So I do hope ultimately, though, that people, when they do leave my paintings, though, they feel a little sense of joy, a little sense of perhaps hope, even that the world isn't necessarily as dark as it seems, and that there is kind of always this sort of underlying color and this underlying vibrancy in everything and everywhere, in everything that we do. It's almost a little bit of an act of rebellion, I would say, in terms of, we live in this sort of this world that is increasingly more covered in cement, covered in urban structures. But even there is still a glimmer of vibrancy and creativity and beauty. And I think that's something that I hope people take away from my work, an element of positivity, an element of hope. Um, so yeah, thank you so much for your time, Stan. And my social handle is macattack.art on Instagram if you want to find any of my works. I do prints, photography, and also original artwork on my website, which is macattackart.com. And yeah, thank you so much for your time and your attention, and wishing you the best. Thank you.